In this unit, I'm going to talk about the IMC planning process. Now, it's probably going to seem like I'm covering a hodgepodge of different things here, but the premise is this. Before you jump in and develop your IMC communications plan, you need to understand a variety of things. You need to understand your business. Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to accomplish? You need to understand your strategies and your strengths and weaknesses. You need to understand your competitors, and you need to really know what your unique points of difference are. In other words, what makes your organization different and unique from all the rest. And you take all of this information and more and lay it out in a creative brief, which I'll talk more about at the end of this presentation. But the creative brief is simply the document that spells out here's what's going to happen from a marketing communication standpoint. But let's start out by talking about business strategy. Business strategy is really all about where a company is defining the future, where they're trying to go, what they're trying to accomplish with things. And oftentimes it involves making big bets on what your company is all about, and at the same time understanding what it's not about. One of the ways to illustrate this is by taking a look at the different strategies of the world's two largest commercial airplane manufacturers, Airbus and Boeing, because they're both in the same industry, but they both have very different business strategies. Airbus has bet their future on the Airbus A380, which is the world's largest passenger plane. This plane can seat up to 800 people, has a range of about 9,500 miles, and is so big that many airports that land this airplane have had to be reconfigured and had different improvements made to the runways, even to be able to accommodate it. This plane is colossal. But what Airbus, their strategy is taking a look at the future of air travel and saying this plane is designed for airlines that want to send hundreds of people between hubs halfway around the world. In other words, this plane is designed for flights San Francisco to Sydney, New York to Tokyo. Again, large groups of people from one hub city to another hub city around the world. They have clearly staked their future on this mode of air travel. If you look at what Boeing's done, it's taken a different strategy. The Boeing Dreamliner, the 787, is still a large airplane, seats up 250 to 300 people, has a range of 8,500 miles or so. But the strategy that Boeing is employing, in addition to focusing on efficiency, fuel efficiency, and building the plane with composite components and things that are lighter than traditionally have been used in the past, but they're saying, no, the future of air travel isn't these giant planes going from one hub city to another hub city, but it's more that travelers want to go point to point from destination to destination without necessarily going through hubs. So this, again, it's a still large plane, but it easily is accommodated at other airports. And so this plane is more, Denver to Atlanta, or Charlotte to Minneapolis, or other routes like that. It has a long range, but Boeing's future is very, very different. When they look at what they think the future of air travel, it's very, very different. So this illustrates that these two companies have very different strategies about where they're trying to go. And it's actually a wise move for each of them to try to carve out different segments of the market. If they were both going after the the large aircraft business, for example, it could be problematic. Now, of course, Boeing still makes the 747, the world's second largest airplane, but they're really staking their future on this new era of travel with the 787. When you look at what other companies do with their business strategy, it's interesting to see the decisions that they make. This is what General Motors looked like several years ago. They had these brands and many others, but the idea of General Motors was, in a way, trying to be all things to all people, trying to offer a particular product, a particular brand, so that no matter what your budget, no matter what type of vehicle you wanted to drive, they made it for you. They realized, however, in more recent years, that was too unwieldy to try to be all things to all people, and began scaling back and eliminating some of their brands. Today, General Motors is comprised mostly of Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, and GMC. Other brands have either been discontinued or sold off to others. But again, their strategy when they look to the future is to be a more focused, more innovative, smaller company. Kodak is an organization that made some interesting bets on their strategy a number of years ago, and they didn't quite pay off. Did you know that Kodak was the pioneer of digital cameras back in the 1970s? However, there was a fear among the top leadership at Kodak that if digital cameras really caught on, it would erode their film business, which was by far the largest and most profitable component of their organization. So they continued to promote film at the expense of digital cameras, and you know what the story is there. Because they did not exploit their technologies with digital cameras, other companies did. And in recent years, Kodak has had a lot of troubles as they've tried to figure out, if they're not about film, exactly what are they about. Now, their strategy was very different from Apple. Apple knows they knew when they developed and put MP3 players on the smartphones like the iPhones and things, they knew that the market for the standalone iPods was going to dwindle. But instead of being fearful of that, they embraced that and knew that they needed to make changes. So these examples of what these companies are doing kind of illustrate different bets with business strategy. But the point here is to understand what we mean when we say strategy. Again, strategy is really the roadmap you have of the future. Where are you trying to go? What route are you trying to plot? Companies have decisions to make about what they're going to do and about what they're not going to do. Next, let's look at what's known as a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's really just a way that a company takes stock of their own business and looks at what they do well, what they don't do well, and tries to capitalize on the things that they do well and figure out how to address weaknesses and threats that they have. It really helps a firm identify things that can have a major impact, good or bad, on the firm. A SWOT analysis can either be done for an entire business or for a division of a company, or sometimes just for a specific product line. Usually for smaller firms, it's just done at the company level. But let's take a look at how most SWOT analyses are presented. Most analyses look like this. They're put into a grid, and you have along the top, you have internal strengths and internal weaknesses. These are things that the company can control. You're in charge of what you can be good at or what you can improve upon. The things in the bottom quadrant are external opportunities and external threats. External opportunities would be things that are happening that are outside of your control, but that may bode very well for your business and that you need to figure out how to take advantage of. External threats, on the other hand, are those things in the marketing environment that don't bode so well for your business or that threaten it, but they're things that you can't really do anything about. Your job there is to figure out more how to react to them. Now, companies go to great length to really determine their SWOTs, their strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Here I'm going to show you an example of one company. This is a SWOT analysis for Ben & Jerry's. And you can see that the key thing that I want to make sure you know is that strengths and weaknesses are internal things, meaning you can control them. Opportunities and threats are external, meaning that you can't. But if you look, for example, at the SWOT analysis for Ben & Jerry's, you'll see that some of their strengths are the fact that they have a very prestigious, well-known brand, they have good market share, and they can complement Unilever, that's their parent corporation, they can complement the existing ice cream brands. Some of the weaknesses. There's a danger. Ben & Jerry's social responsibility actions can add costs and reduce focus. If you know anything about Ben & Jerry's, you know that they're always concerned with charitable and environmental and other like causes. And the fear is that you get so focused on those things that you forget that you're really making ice cream. If you look at the opportunities that Ben & Jerry's may have, things like a growing demand for quality ice cream overseas, and an increasing demand in the U.S. for frozen yogurt and other low-fat desserts. Those are things that are happening that they may be able to take advantage of. But there are also some threats. One of the big threats that Ben & Jerry's has is that as consumers become more and more concerned with eating fatty foods and consuming things that are healthy, they know that Ben & Jerry's customers, which usually skew as a more educated bunch, those are the types of customers who actually read nutrition labels. That could actually be a threat. There's also competition from Pillsbury and Haagen-Dazs and others. So again, any company, any organization really, ought to be able to put together a SWOT analysis, which gives them a better picture of what they need to be focused on in terms of market opportunities and strengths and things of that nature. SWOT analysis are usually ongoing endeavors, meaning they're always changing, but it's a good snapshot, good way for a company to keep in focus a picture of what they're doing right and what they need to improve upon. The next thing that I want to talk about, I'm going to introduce 3 additional P's, and I've kind of made these up. These won't be in a textbook, but it's an easy way to remember them. And the first one is unique selling proposition. Now you'll see when I call in them the 3 P's, I'm kind of cheating a little bit because really this one starts with you, but it's just more, it's easier to remember 3 P's than a U and 2 P's. But anyway, I digress. A unique selling proposition is what's the one thing that your company or your product is most known for. Is your company known for the best service, the best price, the best luxury, the best image? There are many different things, but companies usually identify of all the things that we could do, here's what we want to be known as. Let's look at some examples. There are a lot of companies that sell pizza, but when you think of pizza delivery, Domino's tends to own that space. They worked very hard so that you associate their product with delivery. That is their number one unique selling proposition. Avis, number 2 in the car rental business. Their focus is the fact that they try harder. Their unique selling proposition is that, hey, they're not the biggest, but they're the ones that are going to try hardest to meet your needs. When you think of FedEx, of all the things that FedEx does, you think of overnight delivery. Their slogan years ago was when it absolutely, positively has to get there overnight. And that's exactly the premise that they have built their business on. Again, they do many things, and they do many things well. But of all of those things, the thing that stands out most is the idea of delivery. While I'm on this slide, and this is just for fun, have you ever really looked closely at the FedEx logo? There's some unique things going on. First of all, do you see the arrow? That's pointing forward, conveys forward movement. It's between the E and the X. Now, you have to look a little harder for this next one, but do you see the axle of the truck, which conveys movement? Look closely at the E and the D, and you maybe have to squint a little bit. But if you do, you can see that the E and the O could both be tires, with the line on the E connecting is the axle between those. Again, conveys movement. Very, very brilliant logo. Let's talk about the next P, preemption. Preemption is the concept that you take a feature that many other products have and you figure out how to make it your own. The best way to explain this is just to look at some examples. What candy doesn't melt in your hands? Which candy comes to mind when you think of that? Most people would probably say M&Ms, due to a very successful slogan that M&Ms has had over the years. But yet, if you think about it, there are many candies that don't melt in your hands. I've never had a Jolly Rancher melt in my hand. I've never had a Tootsie Roll melt in my hand. There are many other examples of candies that don't really melt, but M&M's owns that spot in your mind. And when I say own it, I don't mean that they literally own it from a copyright perspective or anything. Certainly your slogan is copyrighted, but they own the spot in your mind. Let's look at some others. What candy bar satisfies hunger? A lot of people will say, well, it's Snickers. And I say, really? That means that Milky Way or Three Musketeers or Baby Ruth or all the other types of candy bars, those don't satisfy hunger? Well, of course they do. But Snickers owns the positioning of being the one that satisfies hunger. They've worked very, very hard through their promotions and things to build that image. Let's do a few more. What shampoo gets rid of dandruff and flakes? A lot of people will tell you it's Head and Shoulders. Again, a lot of shampoos get rid of dandruff. In fact, I'm sure that most do. But Head and Shoulders has carved out the position with this, that it's them. What deli sandwiches are fresh? Well, one would hope that any deli sandwich you bought is fresh, and most are. But there's one company that stands out, and that's Subway. What greeting card shows that you care the very best? Hallmark. In most people's minds, that's what they would say. Does that mean if you give any other brand of greeting cards, you don't really care? Well, of course not. But again, Hallmark has worked very hard to carve out this position. I also hope that you can see the connection between the space that they're trying to occupy in your mind, the space that they're preempting, and the slogans that these organizations develop with their advertising and other marketing efforts. And the third P is positioning. And it's what image does your company or your product occupy in the minds of consumers in relation to the competition? That's what's key here. When you think of brands and different companies, there's usually something that comes to mind in your head, and you know how they compare to the competitors. Let's look at how this can be laid out graphically. This is a very simple positioning grid. It's just two lines with that intersect in the middle, and you can have categories being anything you want. We're going to look at the category of lodging just for this example. And the categories at the end of either axis, you can make those up too, but they need to be opposites. Something can be high cost, low cost. Something can be special or everyday. Now, I just completely made up the example we're going to look at here. If a company were really engaged in developing their market position, which most do, they do all kinds of market research to make sure they know exactly where consumers think about things. So I'm just trying to illustrate a point. So don't take this as being accurate, but take it as being something that will help you understand the concept here. Again, we're talking about lodging, and let's just start looking at different brands of lodging. And let's pull one out of our hat, and it's Days Inn. And let's plot that on the graph where we think it would be. I think most people would say, well, Days Inn is a low-cost lodging provider, and they are definitely more everyday than special in terms of the position that they occupy in your mind. Okay? Easy enough. The first dot's always easy to put. Now let's put another one. Let's throw on Ritz-Carlton. And you can see that that's pretty easy too, because Ritz-Carlton is probably about as far away from the spectrum of in your mind's position as Days End. You think high cost and you think special occasion. All right, so those two were easy. Let's throw on another one. Let's throw on Marriott. Okay, most people would say that Marriott is probably closer to Ritz than to Days Inn. It's a little bit higher cost and certainly more special. So we'll put the star in this quadrant. And again, I'm making this up, but I want to show you what starts happening here. Let's put on another brand. Let's put on Hampton Inn. We might agree that Hampton Inn is a higher cost than a Days Inn, and maybe it's a little bit more towards the special end of the spectrum, but is still more of an everyday hotel. Fair enough, still makes sense. Let's throw on another one. Now's where it gets interesting. Let's look at the Super 8 lodging chain. Where do you think that would go? Is Super 8, in your mind, higher cost or lower cost than Days Inn? And is it more everyday or more special? And it's usually not practical to assume that one organization would go right on top of the other one. It forces you to think a little bit. Where is it in relation to things? Let's throw on another one. Econo Lodge. Where does Econo Lodge fit in your mind next, in relation to Days Inn and Super 8 and really all the other lodging chains that we could put on here? Again, I stress that I'm making this up, but the point being this. Let's say you're in the marketing communications department for Days Inn. It's very important for you to understand how consumers view your product, your service offering in relation to all the competitors. How are you different from Super 8? How are you different from Econo Lodge? Where would Motel 6 go on this graph? Etc., etc. And once you understand that, it's easier to start building and creating your brands and your creative strategies because you understand where it is you fit. Now, that doesn't mean that things can't be repositioned, that you can't decide that you need to be, in this case, Days Inn perhaps could decide they need to move up the spectrum. They want to be known as a more high-cost, more special occasion lodging provider. It wouldn't be easy, but that can be done. And I'll share some examples separately from this unit of things that companies have done to achieve that. As an aside, if Days Inn were to choose to do that and to try to become extremely high-end, one of the things they need to do is rebrand, change their name, because really, there's only so much that someone would ever be willing to pay for the brand known as Days End. Let's move on. I want to talk now about a fabulous approach to understanding customer needs. And I want to explain the difference between a product feature, a product advantage, and a product benefit. Let me go through a couple of examples, and then I'll explain why this is important. A product feature is a physical characteristic of a product or a service. It usually answers the question, what is it? And is expressed in things like size, color, taste, quality, delivery, terms, price, quantity, flavor, uses, and many, many other things. Let's say that we are working with a restaurant. The fact that that restaurant serves 10 kinds of pie, that's a product feature. It doesn't tell you why you should care about their pie. It doesn't tell you why you should eat their pie. It simply states the facts. 10 kinds of pie. A product advantage explains why the physical characteristics of the product matter. What does it mean? Well, the fact that a restaurant has 10 different types of pie means things like variety, unique flavors, and many, many other things that we could think of. And a product benefit answers the question, so what's in it for the buyer? Why should he or she care? Well, why would someone care that there were 10 types of pie? It could be things like assurance. It means that no matter what you're hungry for, the restaurant is likely to serve it. Maybe it means things like fun. Diners at the same table can mix it up and share bites with each other and try many different things. Or maybe it's the opportunity to explore new flavors that you might like. So you can see we've taken the fact that the restaurant has 10 kinds of pie, and you can turn that into a benefit that customers care about. And the reason this is important is consumers buy benefits. They typically don't buy features or advantages, they buy benefits. But what happens so often is organizations in their marketing, they promote product features. They'll talk about the 10 kinds of pie without really telling you why it's important. Or automobiles will talk about different features that they have with their product, but they really don't put that in terms of benefits, which is what you buy. A quick review. A product feature is a physical characteristic of the product or service. It answers the question, what is it? And it's things like taste, color, quantity, etc., etc. Another example would be a car that has a 10-year warranty. Well, the advantage of a car that has a 10-year warranty means if it breaks, you don't have to find a mechanic or pay for repairs. But the real benefit of that is things like peace of mind, being worry-free, saving money. Let's go through one more example. The smartphone is 4G. That's nothing more than a product feature. But the advantage of that would be that download speeds are faster. That would be one advantage. There'd be others. But when you really look at the benefit, it's things like there's no waiting and there's instant connections. And so, again, I stress that when you're putting together your creative briefs, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, the key is to be looking at features, advantages, and benefits and make sure that your marketing messages are articulated in terms of benefits. One more time, feature, advantage, benefit. Know the difference. If you're stumped sometimes on exactly how to tell what the feature, advantage, benefit of a particular product is, you can try to plug it into a sentence. The feature means what, with the real benefit to the buyer being, and you put the benefit in there. So if you, again, you can take any type of product and split out what you think the feature, advantage, benefit is. Ensure you stay focused on the benefit in terms of your communication. Finally, we're going to talk about creative briefs. Nope, creative briefs are not underwear, or I suppose they could be. But a creative brief is the document that spells out the plan for a particular promotional campaign. It's the thing that keeps everyone on track. It spells out unique selling propositions and themes and tones, and it helps make sure that all of the subsequent marketing tactics that are implemented, from advertising to public relations to sales promotion to direct marketing, it ensures that all of those things are in sync with each other. And creative briefs are critically important for integrated marketing communication programs. A creative brief is usually a fairly succinct document. There's no set number of pages, although I've never seen one that is more than 5 or 6 pages. A good rule of thumb is keep them to 4 pages or less if you can, because the idea is to give a very quick snapshot of what's going on with the product, what the benefits are, what the unique selling points are, what's going to be promoted, how it's going to be promoted. Now, when I say how it's going to be promoted, it doesn't mean that this is the plan that spells out who you're going to direct marketing to and the schedule of ads that are going to run. Rather, this is the document that you would give to a copywriter or to a designer or to a web developer or others to keep them on track so they can look at it and understand, okay, here's where we're going with this. Here's what we need to be on board with. Problems can really occur with creative briefs if they're not shared and agreed on by management within a company. Sometimes you get into situations where you'll be developing an ad, for example, and when you start sharing the ad copy with the client, they may say, well, this isn't on track. This isn't what we wanted at all. If you've done your job with the creative brief, you can help guide them and keep them on track. You may say that, now remember, we agreed upon this is the direction that the ad is supposed to go. It doesn't mean that things don't change, but it does give you a basis for making sure that the things you're developing are in sync and on track. Now, as the name implies with a creative brief, you want to be simple. You want to be short. That's why they're called briefs. Again, 4 pages is really the ideal length. Sometimes you'll see them go a little bit more, but you would never have a 10-page creative brief. Also, in your creative briefs, you want to avoid jargon, words, phrases, things that people don't know. If you're talking about television ads and you're alluding to share and ratings and gross rating points and impressions and things, keep that to yourself. The reason for that is the creative brief is usually disseminated to all of the people that are working on the campaign, and you need to make sure everyone understands exactly what you're talking about. Also, very important to be creative. You can see I kind of reversed the order of what I was talking about there, but the point is still the same. Avoid jargon and phrases and be very creative with things as well. A tip for you is to always present a creative brief in person if you're at all able to do so. Here's why. It can be easier to read someone and to understand if you're really resonating and really reaching them with your ideas in the creative brief if you can see their body language. Are they attentive? How are they sitting? Are they paying attention? Do they seem engaged? It's hard to do those types of things online or over the phone. I had a situation recently where a client I had worked with before and thought that I knew well developed a creative brief for a campaign, and just because of scheduling difficulties and the fact that they were several hundred miles away, realized we thought we could probably just take care of this over the phone and save everyone a lot of time. We did that. They agreed upon it, and when we began developing the creative, when we began sharing copy and things, that's when they started saying, this isn't right, this isn't what we want. I kind of broke my own rule there because I'm convinced had I met with them in person, taken the time to do that, I could have seen that they weren't as engaged as I thought they might have been. Again, if you can read that language, you can ask questions, you can follow up, and you can see things. So, if at all possible, you do want to present the creative briefs in person. Attached with this unit, I will put a sample creative brief. It's for a fictitious organization, but I just want you to see it and get a sense for the types of information that is contained in it. That ends this lesson. Thank you.